Hey everybody, welcome to the Authentic Cinema Podcast. I'm Bob Lyren, your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and good friend Mike Barron. What's up, Mike?
How you doing, Bob?
I'm good, man. I'm excited about this conversation we're about to have about the landmark 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, directed by none other than Steven Spielberg. Quick question before we get into it. Where do you mark the beginning of Spielberg's career? Is this his second film? Because he did Jaws in 75, Close Encounters was 77. He did do Duel, which was, I don't have the year in front of me, but it was like early 70s. And then he did Sugarland Express. Duel was a TV movie that was shot in like 12 days. By the way, I read that they shot that in like 12 days. But do you consider this his second film, his third film?
I think for all intents and purposes, I do consider this Spielberg's second film.
Jaws was obviously kind of the breakout.
You have to say Jaws is number one, right? Like you can't just skip over Jaws. Well, you know, that was his first sort of attempt at a, what do you do? You know, it does beg a question like, what do you do when your first theatrical release is like perfect? A perfect movie on every measurable level.
I'll tell you what you do. You command like 70% of Columbia's annual budget and go out and make one of the greatest films ever made. That's what you do, which is what he did.
That's exactly what he did. But Close Encounters, I think, is really his first auteur film. It's the first film, I think, that he really wrote from scratch. He came up with the story. Right. He wrote the screenplay. He did everything.
Yeah.
And this, one of the reasons I wanted to do this film is because it is Spielberg in his purest form.
One of the things that I think is really cool about Spielberg is that there's so much of him out there. He has, he's not reclusive like we might say maybe Kubrick is, or Lynch is, famous for not really talking about his films. Yeah. Spielberg has talked a lot about not only his films, but his life. What's interesting about that is how much of him is in this movie, from his parents' divorce, which is, essentially a cornerstone of his life. He's explored it in different films and in different ways, and even went as far as to basically make an autobiographical film, The Fabelmans. So you can kind of turn that onto Close Encounters. Knowing so much about Spielberg, you can see little things in it about him.
I would say, Jaws aside, this film is definitely the beginning of the world that Spielberg would go on to create, the language that he would create. And it's interesting because this film is about inventing a language.
Yeah.
Spielberg would essentially change the way films are made, the scale at which films are made, the types of films are made. The whole visual language would completely change in the 1980s, 1990s. Even today, the way we understand cinema, Spielberg has a heavy hand in that. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think, is this new kind of language in its purest form.
Right.
We were saying that it's an autobiographical film, and you brought up the theme of divorce. And I would say the best film to watch this film against would be The Fabelmans. Both these films will help you understand the other one better. The Fabelmans is also about a family falling apart through an inability to communicate. That was a deeply honest, very uncomfortable movie for him. My big ongoing critique of Spielberg is that he always has to resolve things. And I thought The Fabelmans was not resolved. And I think this film, what's great about it is we're seeing what Spielberg's going to do for the next, 5 decades after this. But it's not polished yet. It's not managed yet. It's just pure. It's just coming out of him. He's a young auteur filmmaker making an extremely experimental, messy, vulnerable film on a huge scale, but it doesn't ever give you that patented Spielberg resolution.
The Spielbergian sentiment is, it's like this idea that he has a tendency to kind of steer audiences toward a particular emotional response.
He tells you how to feel.
Yeah. It's easy to see that. And like you said, there's been a few notable exceptions where he doesn't. But what I say when people kind of bring up the sentimentality of Spielberg is I'm like, well, he's been doing it for like 50 plus years. So at this point, I think we just kind of have to accept the fact that maybe this guy does actually look at the world this way. Maybe he does really believe in the overall goodness of human beings and wants to make the world a better place. And he's using his movies to do that. That being said, sometimes people say that there's like simplification of complex ideas, that sometimes he kind of skirts past those things. But ultimately, I think that if optimism is your biggest critique of someone, like It's fine.
I'm going to push back a little bit. I've never been able to accept it. It drives me crazy. But my critique of him does not come from a place of saying, oh, he's overrated or he's not a very good filmmaker. No, quite the opposite. My critique of him comes from the fact that he is a virtuoso filmmaker. This is someone with an innate understanding of storytelling, an innate understanding of visual storytelling. This is someone who invented his own cinematic language, and that cinematic language that he invented will become the mainstream cinematic language for the next 50 years at least. So my critique of Spielberg is that he knows better. You would be hard-pressed to find a filmmaker who has a better grasp of the role of mystery in storytelling. And yet there's this strange need to solve that mystery. He has to button everything up. So few of his films leave a kind of opening for contemplation where the audience can go home and reflect upon what the film meant for them. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, one of the main reasons I want to talk about it is because at the end of the film, we're left in the mystery. And that's where the really interesting questions start. And he knows how to do that. I admire this film. I admire Spielberg for making this film because at the end, it's a mess. It's a big, beautiful, mysterious mess.
The big debate about this movie is kind of like the end. It's like Roy's story is like, it's crazy. And like you said, family dynamics play a huge role. But in 1977, it was a different time. It was, a different culture and people looked at things different ways. I was reading a little blurb about this film before we started recording, and someone said, like, I went to see this movie in 1977 with my parents. I was a young child at the time. And when the car pulls up behind Roy at the beginning, when he's like waves the car around and the car drives around, and then another car comes and he waves it around and there's a spaceship and it raises up. This person said, like, there was like audible gasps in the theater from adults. Like, it's important to remember that this was a cutting edge film at the time.
It's the same year that Star Wars was released. I don't normally like to do this, but I did hear Quentin Tarantino say something really great. He was talking about the fact that it was released in the shadow of Star Wars. So in the 77, you have this incredible year where you have Star Wars, these two groundbreaking science fiction films coming out. You have Lucas, Spielberg. And he said about Star Wars, Tarantino says, Lucas is telling just a great story there. He's done a great job directing that film. Lucas, though, is borrowing from other filmmakers. Like, he's borrowing from Kurosawa.
Right.
He said what's remarkable about Close Encounters of the Third Kind is, like, Spielberg's not borrowing from anybody.
Right.
It's his own visual language.
He and George Lucas essentially invented the idea of like a blockbuster and these event films, Jaws, and then Star Wars. But I kind of wanted to get into your relationship with the film. I know you mentioned to me prior to recording that you've seen this movie like 5 times in the last year. So I'll kind of just throw that into our standard authentic cinema podcast question, which is like, why did you pick this film? But like, maybe you can kind of talk about both.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the fact that I told you that this film has kind of possessed me in the same way that Devil's Tower possesses Roy Neary in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I was sort of reintroduced, I guess you could say, to this film last summer, right after we moved to Portland. Portland has this fantastic revival cinema scene, and I saw that the Hollywood Theater, which is my favorite of all these revival theaters, was going to be doing a screening of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And the last time I saw this movie was probably when I was in high school on VHS. And I honestly, I didn't remember much about it. And I can tell you from the very first scene of the film, I was absolutely mesmerized by the pure cinema of this movie. I've been very interested for a long time in what makes something cinematic and what kind of stories can only be told cinematically. And I feel like Close Encounters of the Third Kind right away, I said, I'm experiencing something that's just pure cinema. The lighting, the photography, the editing, the sound design. There is just this incredible dynamic cinematic energy that kicks in as soon as the film starts. And another thing that hit me is the family dynamics of the film. I had forgotten how realistic the portrayal of the family is in this film. Spielberg does a great job of showing parental exhaustion and the kind of loving chaos of domestic life. And I had an idea that, if you were to strip away that whole layer of science fiction and special effects, you would still have this extraordinarily compelling and intimate family drama about a family that disintegrates through a failure to communicate. And I think that's what this film is about at its core, the struggle to communicate, the struggle to connect. As I was walking back to the car with my friend after watching the movie, I told him, I said, I think this film is Spielberg working out what it's like to be an artist, the kind of blessing and curse of having the artistic calling. And it's occurred to me in the innumerable conversations I've had with people after watching this film over the last year that the artist is able to access dimensions of reality beyond language. And Spielberg is working out for himself the cost of the vision, of having this vision in your mind that you need to express, but that no one else can properly comprehend. The artist is someone who gets to maintain a kind of childlike wonder, but at the same time, the cost of maintaining that childlike wonder means you don't fit in. And that's a blessing and a curse, as we see with the character Roy Neary. He gets to access this profound mystery, but his normal life completely disintegrates. This is why I want to talk about this film. This is Spielberg's most honest and vulnerable film, and I have been forcing people to talk about this film with me for over a year, and I thought, well, Mike, you have a podcast. Why don't you bring it onto the podcast and talk about it?
One thing that people like when they revisit this film, one of the things you hear from people or read about this film is how kind of lived in and authentic the domestic side of the film is. The bedrooms and the houses, and there's that really great part when the kids are leaving and he's like in the backyard. People are like mowing their lawns, they're grilling, kids are playing outside. That's what kids used to do back in the 70s. They played outside, okay? There is an authenticity to the time, and I think that he's trying to build authentic worlds.
Yeah.
There's an authenticity to the domestic side of this film that people really respond to. And that was a really good point about if you took away all the alien stuff, if Spielberg didn't have a blockbuster with Jaws, he probably would have been making the Neary family story.
Yeah.
Another thing about this movie is it's not a conventional plot. It's not a conventional story. Before we started, I told you, like, one of the things I wanted to talk about, basically the first 20 minutes of this movie, I think are probably just mind-blowing. And I think that one of the things I love about it is that Spielberg, he understands that, like, it's not just about creating mystery. It's about providing information that's not organized. The first 20 minutes of movies are like, they're like a chain of disconnected events.
Yeah.
The lost aircraft, the air traffic controllers, and like scientists are traveling all over the place. And then it kind of culminates with Roy. Each scene gives the audience like more data, but there's no explanation. After that, we don't get into a conventional plot.
Each scene in the opening sort of 15 minutes of the movie takes you deeper and deeper into the mystery. We always talk about how important the opening scene is. The opening scene of a film will tell you essentially what the whole film's going to be about. It'll introduce all of the themes of the film. And we see right away in the opening scene that this film is going to be about communication.
Yeah.
You have a guy speaking English to a person that speaks Spanish to a person speaking French. You have these three languages being spoken, and they're trying to describe things that really can't be described. Like the elderly Mexican man who was visited the night before, and he says last night the sun came out and sang to him. These things defy language. There is no frame of reference. We have no language to describe what we're seeing. We have to almost describe it through poetry. What a poetic line. That sounds like William Blake or something like that. The sun came out at night and sang to me.
In the opening scene in the desert, in the Mexican desert, when they find the planes and Bob Balaban's character, Laughlin, he's genuinely like terrified. Not terrified because like he thinks aliens are coming. He's terrified by like, this makes no sense.
You can't comprehend it. And I love that it's in a sandstorm. We have this wind and this, so people aren't just having to speak three languages, right? Like they have to shout over the wind. Noise is very important. It's this loud wind. The sand is obscuring everything. And then, Bob Balaban essentially is feeling what we're all feeling.
You notice how he's like backing away from the camera? He's like he's like, I'm backing away from this like it's a threat. I love when filmmakers, and Spielberg is very good at letting the actions of the camera or the actions of the actor encompass what he wants you to feel in that moment. Bob Balaban's character backing away, that evokes a reaction in me.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk about the opening is the air traffic control scene.
Oh, what a brilliant scene. Yeah.
A master class in tension.
Yeah.
We don't cut to the plane. It's all audio. We're just hearing the pilots talking. And there's one really interesting moment when the air traffic controller asks the pilots if they want to file a report. And they both are like, I did not want to file a report, because those pilots know if they file a report, they're going to be grounded immediately. Yeah. No more flying for you. It's a small detail. Acknowledging the presence of aliens or UFOs is enough to get you banished from your profession.
And it doesn't fit.
Right.
The last thing the pilot says, because the air traffic controller asks him, do you want to file a report of any kind? And the guy says, I wouldn't even know what to report. There's no way to explain this. You know, it doesn't fit within this sort of bureaucratic system. It's outside of it.
I kind of look at the opening of the film ending. It's like the first night that all of this is happening. We have like the stuff in the desert. We have the stuff of the air traffic controller. And then we kind of move into Roy Neary's involvement. And I think that his introduction is deceptively important, the way that he's introduced, because it's so chaotic. We don't even know, like, are we going to stay with this guy? Like, or is this just another thing? Because we as viewers have just spent the last 15 minutes like, what is going on here? There's airplanes in the desert from the 1940s. Okay. Like there's air traffic controllers. Okay. There's all this stuff going on. We have all this information. We don't know what to do with it. And then he gives us a character that literally has the same experience. And now we're like, this is my guy.
Yeah.
And that's what carries us through the film. And that's how Spielberg can then avoid the trappings of a traditional plot and a traditional narrative, because like the way that we connect with Roy in that first sequence, we're now in it with him for the whole thing.
One of the just sort of central dynamics of the film that I love, at one moment you're in the Gobi Desert looking at the Cotopaxi, like huge ship in the middle of a desert. That's just the surreal imagery of that. So you're on this vast cosmic scale. And then in the next minute, you're in the hallway and the kids are slapping him in the ass with a paddle, and like this very intimate, very realistic home setting.
Right.
You're always bouncing between this sort of grand scale and then just back to this sort of like day-to-day reality of like family life in like Muncie, Indiana, you know, in the Midwest, because we're literally going, essentially you could say, into outer space and then coming right into a family home. The intimate family drama is what enables us to relate to these grand scale kind of things. What it does is it initiates that what if, like, well, what if this was me? This family environment, I'm sure in 1977 looked very familiar. Most American people would be able to completely relate at least to this incredibly realistic family environment. My main attraction to this film is that family and the idea of communication.
Is it the relationships or is it the actual breakdown? Because eventually he abandons his family.
Yeah.
What was it about the family unit that pulls you in?
The absolute realistic environment. The house is just a mess. It just looks lived in. But there's a lot of love in there too. Like it feels like a loving environment. It really captures, as a parent, like the sense of just like parent exhaustion and overwhelm. And you just, the way as a parent, like you just get used to this kind of noise that just is constantly running in the background of your house.
Yeah.
I think it's a really honest portrayal of a marriage, a tragic marriage. I think that Roy loves his wife, and I think his wife genuinely loves him. But after the encounter, they no longer live in the same world. They can't communicate anymore. They just don't connect anymore. It's impossible for them to connect. And you could look at the Terry Garr character and say like, well, come on, like he had an alien sighting, and you know, because other people in the community are saying the same thing. There's all this weird shit going on. You should be a little more sympathetic to him. But I'm also like, well, so what? From her standpoint, like, okay, great. He saw an alien. He still has to be like a dad. He still has to go to work. He still has to like be in this marriage and be present, and he's not anymore. He's losing his mind. She's watching her husband just go insane right in front of her. I don't see either character doing anything wrong. The fight scene where he's in the bathtub, it starts out with her gently knocking on the door and being like, Roy, are you okay? And then he doesn't respond to her. He doesn't say anything to her. And then she starts to get really pissed off because he's not talking to her. He's not communicating. He's not making sense anymore. And she needs a husband. She's got these 3 kids, like just tearing the place apart all the time. And this guy's off in outer space, literally. It's a really difficult situation.
Because of Roy, she's now put into crisis. And it's terrifying to her because she does love her husband. They were a wonderful suburban family living that boomer American dream. They have a house. They're going to go goofy golf and like all that kind of stuff. And you can tell those little moments between the two of them before things start to unravel that they have a very kind of like playful back and forth with each other and tolerate each other. And they love each other very much. And I think that scene in the bathtub is indicative of like her basically like she's terrified at what she's seeing.
Now let's defend Roy for a moment. He had an encounter with an alien life form. Like he saw something that absolutely blew his mind. And he has been now possessed by a vision that he can't ignore. It's not something that he can turn off.
Right.
There is a signal now that he hears in his mind that he cannot turn off. He doesn't have a choice. And his wife doesn't understand that. She doesn't understand because it doesn't fit. It's incredibly inconvenient. She's trying to work with him. She's like, we'll go to family therapy. There's no judgment.
Right.
Everybody gets a chance to say whatever they need to say, but it's not something that can be treated by therapy. It's not something that he can turn off. It's something inside of him that he cannot control. And she is, for whatever reason, incapable of understanding it, doesn't want to understand it. It's too terrifying. It's incredibly inconvenient, and it's tearing her family apart.
At every level of this film, it's about communication or lack of communication or the difficulty in trying to communicate. On one hand, we have this map maker brought in to communicate in French, and everything's like English to French, French to English, and then they're communicating with like music, with these like 5 sounds and like these simple hand gestures, you know, and then like it's about these people's ability to try to communicate what they're experiencing and what they're feeling.
And you're trying to communicate things that cannot be captured by language. I'll try to express what I'm talking about by looking at the design of the spaceships. Even in the way the special effects are made, we can't see the shapes of these craft very well.
Right.
You can't really see actually what they look like.
Yeah.
The lights are out in front and it kind of obscures the actual shape of the spaceship. It's very amorphous. So when that first night to Terry Garr, he goes into his wife, Ronnie, and he's like,
wake up, you're not going to believe what I saw. Ronnie?
Don't.
No, listen, Ronnie, I never would have believed it. There was this, in the cab, there was this whole, there was a red wuss that...
If you listen to him, he's not saying anything at all. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It is very difficult to describe. In other words, there's no pre-existing frame of reference to describe what he's gone through. And this is what will destroy his marriage. The whole film is a struggle of how to communicate what is outside of the realm of language. The usual tools we have to communicate our experience or to communicate our feelings are swept away by these alien encounters. And then they essentially have to invent a new way. They have to find a new way to connect.
So jumping over to like Barry and his mom, Jillian, do you think that that story, is it about Barry or is it about Jillian?
That's a good question.
It feels like, to me, it's more about Jillian.
And Roy.
Yeah, Jillian and Roy. Like, Ronnie's out, but Jillian understands it.
Yes. I actually think there's like 3 families in this film. I think the first family is, the Nearys. Mm-hmm. I actually see the Lacombe scientists kind of as a family. It's funny because I feel like the kind of rambunctious children will often mirror like the scientists like breaking into the office and stealing the globe. Like they're behaving like children too, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and then I think the third family is Jillian and Barry and Roy. And this is a theme in divorce.
Right.
You leave one family and then you go get a new family. It comes down to this question again of communication. Like Ronnie's on her way out. Like Ronnie doesn't understand this. Ronnie wasn't there. Ronnie didn't see what he saw. Jillian understands Roy. Like they understand each other. They went through this thing together because he almost ran over Barry in the road. There's that wonderful sequence where they're evacuating the town in Wyoming. They're trying to load Jillian onto the train, and you hear her calling, but you don't see her. And then finally he sees her, and then they meet, and they just hug. You were talking earlier about the Balaban scene where he's like, what is going on? This is another moment of almost the exact same intensity of relief I feel when they hug, when they find each other. Finally,
Right.
Roy and Jillian find someone who totally understands what they see. This is someone that he doesn't have to like try and explain what he's seen. They live in the same world. They have a language to speak about it. He can't do that with his wife, but he can with Jillian. But what I would ask you is, I don't think their relationship is necessarily romantic. This is also in a sense an encounter of a third kind.
This isn't a tryst. It's not a love affair. It's not even romantic. It's actually deeper.
Yeah.
One way to interpret it, I'm not sure that this is right, but this is all Spielberg trying to reconcile his own parents' divorce.
Yeah.
The only way that I can rationalize my parents splitting up is that one of my parents must have had a connection with someone that transcends what I understand about marriage and family, and that is justifiable, I guess, in some sense. The breakup of his childhood family was just, it's a foundation of who he is as an artist and a filmmaker. He hasn't fully, at this time, he didn't fully understand what he was feeling about like his own life and the circumstances surrounding his childhood. Because, the ending of the film, like you can, if you want to be literal about the ending of the film, you could be like, well, he abandoned his family. Like he left them, it's not that. It's not an issue of abandonment. To me, it's more about like, he's transcending.
It's so easy for us to level like moral judgment against Roy at the end. Like, but
Right.
Come on, like he's been possessed. He has to go. And I think there's no right answer here. There's no like,
Yeah, you can't solve
yeah,
it.
it's exactly. It's left unresolved. You can't resolve it. It's messy.
I want to talk a little bit about Lacombe.
Yeah.
Fascinating character. He's a scientist,
Yeah.
but the way that Spielberg presents him is not like a scientist. He's not there for exposition dump. He's not there to explain everything. He's not a skeptic pointing out problems. He's in charge, but he's not like an authority figure.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is most interesting about the character of Lacombe is his calmness throughout all of this. Roy is like obsessed. Jillian is frantic.
Yes.
Ronnie is broken. The military's trying to control everything. And then like, what's the public? The public's just like panicked. We just get all these different things. And at the center of it is this like really calm dude that's like humble. He's understanding. He's kind of seems spiritual in a way.
He's the way you wish that people in roles of authority behaved.
Right.
Because he does. He has sort of just an inherent kindness and gentleness. What's driving him is not power. It's not money. It's not fame.
Right.
This guy is driven because he wants to know. He wants to understand.
He's driven, but he's not like arrogant.
Right.
He's not controlling and he's not cruel. He's clearly like incredibly intelligent, but also not, he's uncertain about things. He doesn't really know.
There's a wisdom about him, right?
Yeah.
There's that scene where they figure out the map coordinates and all the guys are into the coordinates and he's on the headset and he's like, écoutez.
Écoutez, je reçois des informations maintenant. Écoutez. Écoutez.
Écoutez in French means listen. He says, listen,
Right.
listen. What is he in the film? He's like a great listener. There's that wonderful moment in the opening scene with the elderly Mexican man and the guy's like asleep and Lacombe just comes over and gently puts his hand on his face, just gently, and kind of wakes him up and then just is present with him. And then that's the guy feels comfortable to start speaking, even though they speak two different languages. And so this is a man who not only listens through language, he can listen beyond language. Roy can see beyond language. Lacombe can hear. He's a linguist, I guess. He's a physicist, who knows what he is. Kind of like
He's a cool
you
dude.
just know he's a cool French genius. He doesn't want to be labeled. But I think it's the wisdom of listening.
I'm sure at some point in my relationship with this film, I kind of viewed Roy as like the Spielberg stand-in. But I actually think that Lacombe might be more of a stand-in. I don't know. I think maybe both. Maybe the characters of Roy and Lacombe, they each kind of represent a little bit of Spielberg.
I do think it's both. If you think about Spielberg as an artist, like he just understands the film language, the cinematic language, like he just knows it like in his bones. He's a boy genius. But he's also profoundly intelligent when it comes to the technical and engineering sides of filmmaking. He and Lucas like completely revolutionized special effects and the kind of technical aspects of filmmaking. So there's these kind of two sides of Spielberg, right? You have this profoundly technical kind of scientific engineering kind of side of him, this very mathematical side of him. And then you have this like storytelling side of him. And I think that Neary is just sort of the visionary side of Spielberg. I heard on the Rewatchables podcast that you sent me, they were talking about Kubrick takes so long to make his films, and Spielberg's like, I could never take that long because once I get a story in my head, like I just have to get it out.
Right.
Well, we see that energy in Neary.
That obsession with the story, right?
In Lacombe, we see another side of Spielberg, which is the patient, methodical scientist.
Almost like the philosophical side, like a thinking approach to
Yeah.
things.
And then I would say the third part of this trifecta is Barry, which is just the childlike, innocent wonder.
Right.
It's interesting that at the end of the film, Barry comes off the spaceship and then Roy goes onto the spaceship. And so Gillian is essentially trading these two people that are almost like the same person. I think there's an aspect to Roy. He's the boy who can't grow up.
Right.
What's the first thing we see with him?
Playing with
He's playing with a
trains.
toy train. He's the big kid. And then the film that he suggests that they go see instead of Goofy Golf, he's like, let's go
Pinocchio.
see Pinocchio. Well, what's Pinocchio about? It's about the boy that can't grow up. Gillian's trading one boy for another boy.
Right. I think that a big part of Spielberg's success is constantly trying to convey that sense of wonder to an audience, which probably leans into why there's always like an optimistic message in his films.
He wants to return to that innocence, that innocent sort of wonder he had as a kid.
Right.
But I would say in the same breath, he's a filmmaker who understands mystery and the relationship of wonder with mystery.
Yeah.
Take it back to Jaws. The genius move in Jaws is that we don't see the shark because the shark in our mind is always going to be more...
Infinitely more terrifying, right?
The studio made him shoot Neary going inside the spaceship. We go inside the spaceship too. There are cuts of the film with that because he was like, I could get all my funding if I agreed to do this. But he pulled that shot from his own cuts of the film from what you see now because he says like that's for the audience's mind, that mystery.
Right.
And I think he forgets. He tries to manufacture the mystery or he tries to manufacture the wonder, but he forgets that the source of the wonder comes from this source of mystery.
Right.
One of the things I love in the film is the trope with the maps.
Okay.
Roy is always trying to like read the map and he never can like figure out where he is on a map. And there's a great shot when he's driving towards Devil's Tower. The map takes up the whole windshield of his car and he's like driving with the map on the windshield of the car. And then like he's like, and then he takes it down and he's in the middle of all this traffic. And it's this idea of like where we're going in this film, there's no map for it.
Right.
You can't read it on a map. Map is language. It's like a tool, but it's not the thing in and of itself. And what we're going to be doing in this film, we have to go and map new territory, but there is no map for this. That's why Roy can never read the map.
A map is going to give you direction. A map's going to give you a destination. A map's going to guide you. There is no guidance. There is no map for what Roy is dealing with.
The map is what's already been discovered, what has already been experienced. And that's what language is. We have language for what we've already experienced, for what we share and how we communicate.
Right.
Roy is being plunged into a situation where there is no map for this. There's no language for this. It's part of the genius of Lacombe is he's the map maker. He's the explorer. But this to me is what the film is sort of ultimately about. It's about what is communication. You know, there's the signal and the receiver, right? You send and then you receive. So there has to be a connection. You haven't really communicated until you've connected. And at the end of the film with the aliens, we're able through this music and color to finally like make the connection with the aliens. We finally understand each other. But we had to map that. We had to go out into the unknown and find that. We had to step out into what we don't know. We had to step into the mystery. And then what's great about Roy is Roy goes even deeper into the mystery. He just never stops. He goes all the way. He's gone.
Right. Yeah.
Why doesn't Lacombe go? You could argue it's both the scientist and the artist's role to go into the unknown, into this mystery and communicate.
You send the guy that's obsessed to the point of like pushing everything in his life away and this is it. Whereas the scientist was like, what got us here?
Yeah.
But the artist has to be the one, the obsessed one has to be the one to go all the way.
When we reveal the mystery, once it's been revealed, then it belongs to the scientist. And the scientist goes and tries to explain like why that is the way it is.
the scientist explains it. The artist is the one that communicates it.
Yeah. But the sort of blessing and curse to the artist, the real artist, is that they're always in the mystery. They get to contact this kind of unmediated like reality, I guess, but at enormous cost.
Right.
Think about like Van Gogh. You think about Caravaggio. You think about all these great painters. Most of them were absolute fucking lunatics.
Right.
Mystics do that. You know, what is a mystic? The mystic tradition is to experience that which cannot be experienced.
Right.
Dying before you die.
Monsieur Nery, I envy you.
The artist communicates, the scientist translates.
That's good.
Yeah.
So we did a good job translating
Yeah.
this film today on this episode of the Authentic Cinema Podcast. Now we have to be artists and go out and try to communicate this. Last question.
Yeah.
This is it. Last question. Then we'll get out of here. Are you Roy now, or are you Lacombe? Are you still obsessed with this movie? Are you still going to be bothering everyone that you talk to about this movie, or are you got it out of your system?
No, I think I'm still going to be bothering everybody about this movie.
Okay, you're still Roy. Got it.
I think I am.
Okay.
I just think it's a beautiful movie. It's exuberant. It's got so much energy. There's so many ideas going on in this film, but there's also just this sort of effortless feeling. This is Spielberg speaking his own language. This is really an artist operating at the highest level. And my critique of him is that I wish he would go there more often.
Mike, this was a great pick. It was great to revisit it and kind of get it back in my vernacular and back in my mind map. I feel like I've learned more about this film than any other film we've talked about in the course of this conversation. It was really great. So yeah, thank you for that. Thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. As always, we like to say, please share the love, share the podcast.
Please like and subscribe.
Check us out. We're on all the platforms. Look for us. Talk to us. If you think of any films you'd like us to talk about, we love hearing from people.
Send us a signal.
Yeah, send us a signal. Yeah, we'll get obsessed.
You know, implant a vision in our mind.
There you go. So, Mike, thanks, man. It was good catching up.
Always a pleasure, sir.